Good morning, everyone. It is 10:30 Central Time, and I'm not sure what time zone you're in, but this edition of the New Character Matters is live, so I can take your calls at 501-258-8326. Hang on just a minute if you're wanting to place a call. Also, the live chat is available. I'll do my best to respond during the broadcast. And we're going to be on for an hour today. I have a few things that I want to say beforehand. I have been working on this book that was originally titled The 10 Commandments of Character for a long time. And I'm trying to get a read on how the volume is here. I'm not seeing a lot of volume here. Let me see if I can fix that. Okay, I think we have a lot more volume going on here now. I'm not sure whether it's good or not. Let me take a moment to adjust that. Test 1, 2, test. All right, I think we're better now. Let me just be sure. Okay, I'm getting some feedback that the sound is good. That's good. But I'm also realizing that it is not what it should be. So let me do some things to fix that. Because I think the wrong mic is working. Yeah. Hang on one sec. Well, it looks like I'm not going to be able to modify things, so we may have a little trouble with some of the audio when we get to any phone calls. But what I wanted to say is I've been working on this manuscript, originally titled "The 10 Commandments of Character" for quite some time. I first introduced this topic in my book, Character Disturbance. There's a section that briefly outlines these life axioms that I've come to believe over my years of experience in counseling, not just with disturbed characters on various places along the spectrum of character disturbance, but also with aggrieved relationship partners. Uh, Time honored principles for developing character, which I believe sincerely is the phenomenon of our age. I believe that you can trace so many of our social ills to the lack of solid character formation in individuals. Matter of fact, I almost dare folks at my workshops to name a problem that we can't ultimately trace back to that. And, you can't pick up a newspaper. Well, these days, people hardly read the paper. They get it online or some get the news some other way or watch TV and not hear a story about someone who's not been able to control themselves and who has done something awful. But this is a universal problem. And we used to focus a lot of time and energy, not just in families, but within communities. We used to make it a major part of our reality to help ensure that we all functioned well. Um, for example, I've written a couple of articles on the blog about the extent of character vetting that families used to do before people got into intimate relationships. Folks got examined uh, pretty closely, wanted to know their history, wanted to know their patterns of behavior. Engagement periods went on for some time, and there was a lot of discernment. And folks had enough regard for one another and for themselves that they didn't give a pass to behavior that was of concern. These days, things are much different on that score. Now, I know, and I mentioned this in the introduction of my upcoming book, I know that people will say that almost everything that we talk about is nothing new. That all the problems that I mentioned in my blog posts are problems that we've had forever. That's true. But what is new, what is very different, is how used to character dysfunction we've become. And what else is new is how much we are willing to give it a pass if we get something we want in any relationship. I know this is particularly true, and I don't want to get political at all, believe me, but this is particularly true in politics these days, um, where by all that seems to matter is what, regardless of what side of the spectrum you're on, all that seems to matter is whether or not somebody's doing your bidding, is promoting the agenda that you have. So it's become a national epidemic. And I really can't tell you how heartening it is to get the feedback that I get from folks about sounding the alarm on this. We are not going to solve our problems, whether they be in the microcosm or the macrocosm. We're not going to solve our larger societal issues, and we're not going to solve our intimate relationship problems by passing a lot of rules and regulations. We have millions of them on the books already. And you know what? Folks with the disturbed character don't pay any attention to them. They find ways around them. So you can try to legislate all you want. This is just folly. So that doesn't work. And you can try exercising power over people and punishing people. That doesn't work either. What really works, and this is why I've been working so hard to restyle my upcoming book, now titled Essentials for the Journey. What really works is changing hearts, not minds, but hearts. Hearts have to change first. Behavior changes after that. And with behavior change comes a change of mind, a true metanoia. I've written about this. One thing I want to mention before we go too much further: therapists And people in relationships with troubled characters make the same mistake. They waste incredible amounts of time and energy trying to get folks with character impairments to see what they're doing and to see and understand the problems with it. Well, I have news for you. They already see. I say this in workshops all the time. I have a couple of little rhyming phrases. They already see. There isn't anything you could tell them that they haven't heard a gazillion times before and from many different sources. The problem is not that they don't see, the problem is they see but disagree. In their hearts, they still believe that they're entitled to do some of the things that they do. And until that heart changes, if it ever will change, nothing's going to be different. So I have another little rhyming phrase. I say that it's not that they're not aware enough. The problem is they don't care enough. That's a matter of the heart, too. So I urge you, if you're in a problem relationship, don't waste time and energy trying to get someone to see what they more than likely already see. What's necessary is to set structure, limits, boundaries, reasonable expectations. It's behavior that has to change. And when behavior changes, over time, the heart begins to change. And over time, that leads to a new way of seeing things. And the reason I say that therapists make this mistake is that too many times, way too many times, I hear this all the time from folks who report what we now call therapy-induced trauma. They tell me that they finally managed to convince their troubled relationship partner to come with them into a joint therapy session. And maybe that the partner has good impression management skills. Maybe they have good ability to present a convincing facade, an attractive facade. Maybe they have good charm, et cetera, et cetera. And so they make a positive impression, but nothing really changes. And if the therapist happens to be aligned with um, if the therapist happens to be aligned with a systems approach that sees everybody as an equal party to the problems that are going on, then the disturbed character gets a pass, and the aggrieved partner feels even worse for the effort. I get so many emails about this; it's disheartening. So, whether you're a person in a troubled relationship or whether you happen to be one of the therapists tuning in today, I beg you, do not waste time or energy trying to get folks who already see but disagree with the basic principles of decent behavior. Do not waste time and energy trying to get them to see what they already see but disagree with. Rather, lovingly but firmly, absolutely firmly and unwaveringly stand on principle. Some things are just not okay, period. Set boundaries, limits, expectations, and do it in the here and now. I can't believe the number of times that I've observed someone in a counseling session sit back and let something happen right there that shouldn't happen, reinforcing the patterns. So I really can't stress this enough. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so committed to this next book, which I'm finishing up final edits to now. I know it's been a long time coming. I know I've been promising this for forever, but this is likely to be my last written work, and I really wanted to get it right. It's really kind of the culmination of my life's work. So I want it to be right, and it's really important to me. Um, I'm going to peruse through some of the chat here and see if there are some questions here that I can answer. And once again, first of all, thank you all for some of the nice comments here. I'm seeing a lot of nice comments. I really appreciate it. Um, and I also appreciate the fact that some folks are saying that they have found some validation in some of my written work. But if you have a question or you want to talk to me live, have a conversation, you can give me a call at 501 258 8326. That's 501 258 8326. Now, I'm getting some folks who are letting me know that they have had this unfortunate experience in therapy of what we call now therapy-induced trauma. It's so tough for somebody who's already been put through the ringer to feel put through the ringer again when all they did was go for help, and especially if they have suffered what we now call the gaslighting effect. We did not have a name for this effect when I first wrote In Sheep's Clothing. The first independent publishing of In Sheep's Clothing, which is now an international bestseller in over 28 foreign languages. But years ago, many, many years ago, we didn't have a name for this phenomenon. I counseled so many individuals who came into my office feeling quite crazy because they just knew in their gut that there was something not right about their relationship partner, their spouse, or somebody else that they were working with, or something like that. But every time they tried to deal with it or confront the behavior, that person somehow made it seem like they were the crazy one, that they had it all wrong, maybe that they were even the more troubled party. And this ended up making them feel crazy. Well, this crazy making behavior is the result of the tactics that character disturbed people use, especially folks very skilled at the art of manipulation. But we didn't have a label for it then. We do now. But what I was starting to say is that early on in my work, when I first published In Sheep's Clothing, one of the things that happened right away, and that through word of mouth made it the bestseller that it became, is that folks identified with that crazy making behavior that I described in the introduction. And I started getting emails and all kinds of other contacts from people saying, "Oh my goodness, this is exactly what I've been experiencing." So we know how widespread that effect is. And we know how good some folks are at the art of what we call impression management now. They know how to put on a convincing facade. They can be quite charming. They can be disarming. And it's just unfortunate that they get so good at it that they have little reason to change it. They have real little reason to be more authentic. And besides which, many times the ways that they intimidate you and get you to back down when you confront them also work. So they have virtually no incentive to change. So let me just take a minute here to look at some the questions here coming in on the chat. Some folks have said that some folks are wondering about the lack of realization of disturbed characters about the natural interconnectedness of all of us. Let me say a little bit about that. Because I actually just went back and revised some of the text in my upcoming book about that. There are individuals who don't seem to appreciate how interconnected we all are. For example, There are some folks who will, in their own minds, say to themselves, hey, it's okay if I get high right now on some illicit substance. I'm not hurting anybody, without any concept of all the connections along the way that brought that illicit substance to their availability, all the people that were damaged, all the harm done. No big picture kind of concept. There are folks like that. But there are also individuals who realize quite fully the interconnectedness of things, and they understand quite fully the impact that they have on other folks, but they don't care. So, just appreciating our interconnectedness is not enough for character. It's part of it. And all the commandments that I've been talking about on the program and that I've been writing about, they all work together. You can appreciate the inherent interconnectedness of all of us and of all things in this world. But if you don't also have a proper sense of self and self worth, if you also don't have uh, a heart to overcome our inherent egocentricity and a natural sense of entitlement that some of us carry with us early on and have to outgrow, if you don't heed some of the other axioms that I talk about, if all that doesn't work together, then just because you appreciate the interconnectedness of things doesn't mean you're going to behave appropriately. Doesn't mean you're going to behave with reverence for life and with decency in your relationship. Um, Somebody was telling me that fortunately they were able to get a therapist that got it, that understands it, and I'm really heartened by that. I stopped doing in-person workshops just about the time that COVID hit. And I was getting ready to kind of hang that up anyway. But for a 5-year period, I got back out on the road. And one of the things that just uh, it unnerved me, shall I say? It unnerved me because here I was after all these years, and of course, getting a great response, not like the early days, getting a lot of folks coming to hear and largely agreeing with a lot of the things that I've been saying for years. So that was very heartening. But for some folks, all too many folks, these are mostly therapists in the audience, you have to understand, of various persuasions. For some folks, it was still eye opening, still news. And, I would always get feedback from my workshop sponsors about the evaluations. And they'd always be saying, "Oh my goodness, this is really good. I wish I'd heard this long time ago, et cetera, et cetera." And I'm thinking, "Oh my goodness, for so many people in the helping profession, these kinds of things that I've been talking about for 25 years plus, it's news. My goodness." And so that's why I stayed on the road as long as I did. And that's another reason why I've written most of my books in kind of a crossover vein. They're written at a level where most folks can understand them, but they're also written sophisticatedly enough so that professionals who are availing themselves of the material can use the material to help other people. And it's really heartening for me to get messages from folks in various programs all over the world, especially recovery programs who use my materials and disseminate my materials. It's really heartening. And I just pray that this next and likely last book reaches as many people as I hope it will reach. My other books were all written for a relatively narrow audience. This next book I mean to be my first mass market book. So I really hope it reaches a wide audience. We've got a lot of character building to do within our societal structures. We've had a vicious cycle going on for many years where a lot of the social institutions, norms, and traditions that we've had that have been time tested for generations, a lot of those things became corrupted over time. And as they became corrupted, more and more character impaired people started populating our society. And as more and more character impaired people populated the society, they tended to chip away at the remaining norms and structures that were there to help people grow in character. So we've had a classic negative, vicious cycle going on for decades now. And it has to turn around, or it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. So, um, I'm reading here some of the comments here. Let me just go through a couple of, and once again, thank you so much for just the kudos. I really appreciate it. You have no idea what that means. Early on in my career, I think I've said this before, but early on when I was doing especially professional training, I remember I remember the first time that I was invited to a medical grand rounds at a fairly prestigious institution. And, some person had discovered my work on the faculty and decided that they really wanted to bring me in. And I had all these eager, young, budding mental health professionals, especially psychiatrists, there. And I began to talk. And I was so anxious in the first place because I wanted to do well because it was my first medical grand rounds. But I was also so troubled by the fact that some folks just could not, could not buy the perspective. They were so married to old, tired, worn out notions about why people did the things that they do that they just couldn't hear a new perspective. And some folks got up and walked out. I was pretty crushed, I have to admit. Now, that hasn't happened in years. As a matter of fact, just the opposite has happened for many years. But in those early days, it was really disheartening. And it still troubles me. It still troubles me when folks don't seem to get it. You know, it's an oversimplification. I know this is an oversimplification, but there are basically two types of people in the world. There are folks who just care way too much and they trouble themselves. They literally make themselves sick with worry because they always want to get it right, do it right, be good. They try very hard and they put a lot of pressure on themselves. And these are the folks that traditional counseling is tailor made for. But then there are the folks who don't care enough, who are not conscientious enough, who are not troubled enough by the things that they let themselves do. And they cause all kinds of heartache in relationships. They cause all kinds of problems on the job. And absolutely none of the traditional methods that we developed over the years are of any potential help to these folks. And that's what's led a lot of professionals and lay people alike to come to the conclusion that when it comes to the disturbed characters out there, there is simply no changing them, no help available. Well, I have to tell you, working with character disturbed people is really tough business. Change doesn't come easily, and there are some that, with all the best methods we have, it's pretty hopeless, at least at this stage of the game. And Also, you have to consider that a person has to be at least in some degree of emotional readiness to change. In other words, maybe the bottom has to have fallen out of their life, or maybe they're experiencing enough failure that they have at least some motivation to be open. But the bigger problem is that most helping professionals haven't a clue what kinds of methods can possibly help. That's the bigger problem. And so for years, I've focused a whole lot of attention on helping professionals get it. Um, this last book is meant for a wider audience. It's meant to help us all grow. We're all in this together, and our troubles are significant. And the risks we face are greater than ever before. We're now among several countries working to make usable, what we call usable, tactical, portable nuclear devices. Things capable of wiping out entire cities that could be carried in a suitcase. Imagine if some really disturbed character with megalomaniac tendencies, with heartlessness, decides or finds a way to get their hands on such a device. My goodness, we have no idea the peril we face, and we are not going to solve our problems the way we have traditionally thought we could. You can't force people to be good, either through legislation or through the threat of punishment or threat of annihilation. That doesn't work. It's never worked. It's never going to work. We have to reach one another's hearts. And hearts have to be converted. And we actually even know how. But we don't have the faith or the courage to do it. We have to hold one another to account, too. We have to hold one another to account. In my work with disturbed characters, I had to develop the art of what I call benign confrontation. This is where you dare to call out the obvious. This is where you dare to call out the disturbing behavior that's a problem, but you do it in a way that is not, that a person cannot interpret as hostile or unloving. I've said such things, for example, to an individual like, I think that the root of the problem here is your inflated opinion of yourself and your personal power and your worth. Oh my goodness. A kind, loving therapist saying something like that? Well, if it's true, and I wrote an article about this, and it's one of the commandments that I have talked about and will be talking about uh, further. If it's true, it has the power to correct and to heal and to grow, but it has to be clear when you put the truth out there that you mean nothing but well. It's disarming to mean nothing but well. All of the great peacemakers knew this. All of the great figures in history who brought empires to their knees knew this little secret. You call out evil, you call it out. But when you call it out with nothing but love, it's disarming. It puts nothing else under the spotlight or on the stage except the evil. It puts the spotlight on it. And if there's anything darkness hates, it's the light. If there's anything darkness hates, it's the light. So, someone has been really active here in the chat, and um, I'm really intrigued by some of the comments a couple of these folks have been making. I'm going to just scroll through a couple of these because I want to respond to them. Yeah, some folks have. One person is asking about some other people's works and the origins of character dysfunction. And let me say this, you know, we human beings are in the cosmic timeline. We are a relatively recent phenomenon. You know, creatures have become extinct years and years and years and years ago, many hundreds of thousands of years ago. And we are a relatively recent phenomenon, and we are still evolving. And a lot of the traits that we still carry with us were traits that absolutely were essential back in Neanderthal times or times even before that. They were essential. For example, individuals who we now call psychopathic or sociopathic, who have this characteristic lack of adaptive fearfulness. As a matter of fact, when you do assessments on folks and you look at their histories, as children, some of these folks will do all these daredevil things because they have absolutely no sense of fear. They will go where others fear to tread, and readily so, having complete confidence of their invincibility. They're both fearless and heartless. Well, these folks, as the heads of tribes, probably were responsible for tribes surviving. The rest of the tribe was probably happy to have these folks leading the tribes. Now, such folks don't fit very well in a modern, evolved, civilized society. So we're still evolving. And so, as far as the origins of these things, we carry a lot of things with us. Socialization is something relatively new. Civilization is something relatively new on the historical front, in the cosmic scheme of things, on the evolutionary timeline. And socialization is a process, it's a painstaking, lengthy process. No other creatures require as much in the way of grooming to function adaptively in the world. Think about it. Think about your own children or children you know, and how long it takes to prepare them to function independently, just to function well independently in the world, let alone with decency. It takes 24 hours a day, every single day, year after year, for many years. Some folks these days are only prepared to function even reasonably independently in their late 20s and early 30s. This is an awful long time to socialize, and that's the nature of human beings. And so, the real tragedy of our times, the reason we're having so many problems, is that we have forgotten how important it is to instill and reinforce certain principles. And we give too much bad behavior a pass. And we do it on purpose. Many times we do it simply because there's something we want that we feel we can have if we'll tolerate. People do this in relationships all the time. And my goodness, what a price we've been paying because we do this in our politics. Oh my goodness. So long as one side or another gets their bidding done, we give all manner of reprehensible behavior a pass. And we're paying the price for it, and we will continue to pay the price for it until we decide that things have to change, until we start reinforcing, recognizing, and reinforcing character. Until we start lauding folks, not for the talents they bring to the table, not for what championships they can help us win, not for their brains or their smoothness of speak, but for how they conduct themselves, what integrity they show, what genuine care and concern they demonstrate, how sincere it is. When we start recognizing and reinforcing those things, when we demonstrate how much we care about those things will turn around. Somebody just said it. Parenting is hard work. Oh my goodness. What an understatement. So is growing in character. And somebody else has just defined what I would like to define, and that's love. It's not a sentiment, it's a behavior, and it's hard work. If it were easy, everybody would do it. The fact is, very few people even know how to do it. Working for more than your own sweet self and your own immediate desires, working on any other person's behalf or for the benefit of all, is what really defines love. And you have to have the heart for it. You have to want to do it. So let me once again mention the number if you want to have a conversation with me. I'm afraid that when you do, the audio might not be too good because I can see that that the system is not working as it's supposed to. Even though I've heard from folks that they can hear okay, the system is still not working as I originally intended it. But um, if you want to have a conversation, you can give me a call at 501 258 8326. That's 501 258 8326. And if the audio is a problem, then I may just have to repeat your, your statement or your question. So let me just peruse the chat once again and see here if there's anything else I'd like to address. Yeah, some people are talking about higher levels of consciousness, waking up. Hard as it is to reckon with, that's an issue that can't be forced. You can yearn for it. You can yearn for a better or righter relationship with that great, impossible to define something responsible for this very existence, for our very existence. You can truly, in your heart, yearn for it. But that awakening that can sometimes happen. I'll use specific terms here that may not be familiar to some people, but that always comes by grace. And it usually happens in two ways, one of two ways, either through great pain and suffering or incredible ecstasy, as we call it, or incredible joy. Either one of those things can decimate us in our ego and open the door to inner reality. Most of the time, as any folks who have participated in 12-step work know, most of the time spiritual awakenings come through what they call hitting bottom. When everything falls apart, when all your coping strategies and all your ways of dealing with life's slings and arrows, and all of your ways of trying to deal with the crazy stuff in your life stop working, and you just crash and sometimes burn. But that's when you become much more centered. And that's when more than likely you're able to get more in touch with your core. Realize and appreciate who you really are, what your soul ardently yearns for. And that's when all of a sudden it becomes clear to you that some of the ways that you've been seeking satisfaction of your heart's desire, while they gave you enough to keep you hooked, are not really giving you what you seek. Wow. Too bad that it usually has to happen with that kind of hitting bottom, with that kind of throwing in the towel, and where you have nowhere to turn but to something bigger. I do have a couple of articles on that topic on the blog on spiritual awakening, and I would encourage you to read and comment on those. You know, I get a lot. I'm remiss here. I get not just satisfaction out of all the comments. I'm bad about, because I'm so busy, I'm really bad about responding back on comments on the blog and other things. But I have to tell you, I appreciate them more than you know, and I learn from them more than you know. I've learned what I've learned from all of the people who taught me, people who came in pain, people who were in those relationships, people who suffered that gaslighting effect before we even had a name for it. These are the folks who taught me. I didn't invent this stuff. I'm, I'm not some kind of genius that just had an epiphany one day. I opened myself up. And what it took is the same thing that it takes anybody in a troubled relationship. You have to start thinking outside the box. You have to start telling yourself, oh my goodness, the things I thought I understood and the way I thought things are supposed to work, they're not working. I realized that about our traditional psychology paradigms. Here I was well trained, trying to do all I was taught to do, and people weren't getting better. So all I had to do was open myself up to what my clients could teach me was the bigger truth. And as soon as I did, everything began to change. And that can happen with individuals too who are in troubled relationships. And unfortunately, it usually has to happen. Those awakening moments usually have to happen with great pain. Usually, unfortunately, you just have to suffer. It's sad but true. Uh, Somebody is saying that this is just the conversation they needed to have today. Well, I'm so glad of that. I really appreciate that. We've got about 10 minutes left before I'm going to close the program. Of course, it's going to be available as a podcast. The recording will be available just like all the other podcasts. Um, I want to talk just a little bit about the narcissism spectrum, though, because I've seen a lot of comments about folks who suffered the trauma of having narcissistic parents and folks who've suffered the trauma of being in relationships with narcissistic individuals. One of the things I came to appreciate early on is that character disturbance exists along a spectrum. There are two spectra, actually, one of type and one of degree. In other words, when it comes to character dysfunction, that character dysfunction can be of a particular variety and it can be of a particular intensity. And so is it with narcissism. Narcissism is a dimension of personality that is common to many character disturbances. And it has many different expressions, some of which are more benign in a sense. Just like there are some forms of prostate cancer that are not as deadly. Okay? There are some forms of narcissism that are even appealing and are not quite as toxic. But then there are other forms that are horribly malignant and horribly toxic and inevitably very destructive. So, how do you tell? How do you tell where somebody is along the narcissism spectrum? Sometimes it's difficult to tell. I've written a couple of articles about charming narcissists, the folks who know not just how to appear benign, but how to cultivate positive regard. They don't actually have very much regard for you. You don't find this out at first. You find this out tragically later. They don't have very much regard for you, but they know how to solicit regard from you. They know how to say all the right things, do all the right things, charm the socks off of you, stroke you, ego massage you, do everything they can to get you to adulate them. Because when it comes to narcissism, there's two things that they just absolutely crave. And notice I didn't say need. I said they crave both attention and adulation. Frankly, it's the last thing they need any more of, but they crave it. And some folks are really, really good at soliciting it. And the more the charming they are, the more successful they are at this. And this is what makes a person who's finally coming to get it, say a relationship partner is finally coming to realize that the person they've been with really isn't that nice a person, but everybody else thinks they're just wonderful. And this really increases the gaslighting effect. This really increases the crazy making feeling. A person begins to wonder, well, everybody else just loves this person. Why do I feel so bad in their company? Why do they make me so upset all the time when everybody else thinks that they hung the moon? Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. There are so many different forms of narcissism. It's one of the tragic consequences of a culture of entitlement, egocentricity. Once again, uh, thank you so much for all these comments, um, especially about the books. I have a lot of comments here about In Sheep's Clothing. My book, Character Disturbance, I think is actually a better book than In Sheep's Clothing. Unfortunately, it never got the launch, and it never got the support of the publisher that my first book did. So it's not that it's not doing well, but it just has never done as well as In Sheep's Clothing. And that's sad for me because it is a much better book. Not the least of which is because it has much more information out there that is potentially helpful to two groups of folks who are looking for help, and also folks who may not be so far on the disturbance spectrum that they can't grow and become more decent people. So I just want to say a couple of words about that. Um, I appreciate the wonderful comments. Most of them have been about In Sheep's Clothing. And I understand how, because of the nature of the book and how it was written and the vignettes in it, et cetera, that it reached so many folks. But I have to tell you, I really believe my book, Character Disturbance, is a better book. And it introduced these 10 commandments of character that I've been talking about. And I am sincerely praying that the reception to this rewrite of this book, Essentials for the Journey, is what I hope it will be. I believe we all have it within us to grow. I am not a pessimist. I think that we're still evolving and that evolution is kind of 3 steps forward, 2 steps backward. We've been going backward for a while. And sometimes it takes hitting bottom to have that awakening necessary to move forward. Sometimes it takes that. We've been in crisis for some time now. Doing all those things that please us and not making character count enough. That's got to change. It's got to change. And it will change. One way or the other, it will change. If we're going to make it, if we're going to survive, it has to change. And so I'm hoping that the reception to my upcoming book will be strong. Let me just read one more time some of these. Thank you for those folks who have said that the books have helped them through difficult times. I also put something up very interesting the other day because something happened with the algorithms on Google several years ago. And so a song that I composed along with my wife many, many years ago uh, that used to get tens of thousands of hits and has been performed all over the country, lost some of its popularity on the internet. And so I reposted some independently produced videos to the song. I had an epiphany about this country that I love and about its real greatness during its period of greatness. There have been periods where we've had not so good character and periods where we've had some pretty good character. But what makes this country great, when it is great, is people who care and who take their responsibilities seriously and who are decent, do their jobs, raise their family, help each other, support their communities. This is what makes any greatness at all. It's not military might or power. It's that. It's character. And so I had hoped through song and through my other work that I would help inspire that again. Well, we have barely a minute left, less than a minute left. So I'm going to wish you all well and thank you for tuning in. And I'll have an announcement soon about the next live edition of New Character Matters. And I hope you'll avail yourself of the recording. And I thank you for tuning in. Love to all of you. I hope life treats you well. And I hope that some of my work has been of use to you. And with that, I'll be signing off. And once again, thanks for tuning in. I'm Dr. George Simon. I'll see you soon in another podcast of the New Character Matters. Take care, everyone.